And welcome back, everybody. The old Ga.Box podcast and radio show, all brought to you by our friends at Casa de Campo in the Dominican Republic. It's the best golf vacay you could possibly plan. Also a nice family vacation. Best golf in the Caribbean, by the way. Teeth of the Dog is one of 4 courses the late, great golf course architect Pete Dye designed. And the Teeth has undergone a renovation. They're going to cut the ribbon in December. Make your plans now. Great place to spend the holidays. Go to casadecampo.com. All right, it's time once again for the Pigskin Prognosticator of Prodigious Proportions. And remember, if you listen to us, you might wake up Sunday morning independently wealthy. Best team to bet on this season in college football against the spread, Memphis, 6-0 against the point spread. They play UAB this week. UAB fired their coach, Trent Dilfer. I think they're likely to go 7-0. Ohio State, number 1 team in the country, 5-1 against the spread. Texas Tech, number 1 team in the Big 12, 6-0 against the spread. Oh, by the way, Alabama on a bit of a roll. They're 4-2 this season against the spread. 3 worst teams to bet on. You've lost money. Oregon State, 1-6. Virginia Tech, 1-6. Penn State, they fired James Franklin this week. The Nittany Lions, 0-6 against the point spread this season. All right, let's start off the games. Louisville at Miami on Friday night. Looking forward to that. Usually there's not a game on Friday night that intrigues me where I want to dial it in, but Miami, number 2 in the country. Louisville, a pesky team, only 1 loss. It happened 2 weeks ago in overtime against Virginia. They were off last week. You don't overlook Louisville. Seriously, a very good football team. But in this instant, going to Miami against a Canes team, which has outscored opponents 175-68 so far this season. Dominated defensively. They've played 4 out of 5 games at home so far. Another home game. Should be a nice crowd. Not a great crowd, but a good crowd. Miami is 35th in offense in the NCAA this year, 16th in defense. They've just been solid. And I think Miami covers that 13.5 against Louisville on Friday. How about LSU in Nashville against Vanderbilt? All these Southeastern Conference games are great games. LSU ranked 10th in the country, Vanderbilt 17th. Vandy a 2.5-point favorite at home. Both teams have a loss, so both teams hope to go to the Southeastern Conference Championship or at least continue a run towards the playoffs. This is a pivotal game. LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier, who came into this season, really is the number 1 quarterback in the SEC. Whether it's injuries or whatever, has been somewhat inconsistent. Threw 2 picks last week against South Carolina, even though LSU pulled out the win. But Vanderbilt at home with a really talented defense and a quarterback with a lot of moxie. I think Vanderbilt covers the 2.5 and hands LSU their 2nd loss of the season. How about the battle in the ACC? Georgia Tech at Duke. You know, Georgia Tech is 6-0, 3-0 in the ACC. Number 12 in the country. Duke also 3-0 in the ACC. Duke is favorite at home. And here's my question. Why is Georgia Tech an underdog in this game? Georgia Tech is solid. Haynes King is healthy. He's been healthy up to this point. Their rugged running quarterback. You know, he's completed 72% of his passes so far this season. And he's gained every rushing attempt. He averages 5.2 per carry. Haynes King. He's the bell cow of that offense. You know, Duke, if you've ever been to a game at Wallace Wade Stadium at Duke, it's a beautiful campus, but it won't be a sellout. They're not going to have an overwhelming crowd. It's not loud. It's not raucous. It's not a home field advantage. Georgia Tech goes in there and wins this football game to stay 4-0 in the ACC, 7-0 overall. How about the game at Georgia? Ole Miss against the Bulldogs. Ole Miss 5th in the country. Some people are saying that may be a bit of a stretch. Georgia is number 9 in the country after the comeback win last week at Auburn. You know, Trinidad Chambliss, outstanding young quarterback, the transfer kid from Division III Ferris State. Great story. Came on late in the Kentucky game because of injury and has been solid. He fell a little bit behind last week against Washington State. They threw some things at him that he hadn't seen, but ultimately they eked out the win to stay undefeated. This is Trinidad's first true road start in the Southeastern Conference, and he's doing it in Athens. Kirby Smart has been preaching to his guys, his staff. He's been talking about it. We must get off to a faster start. We're falling behind in all these big games. Alabama fell behind, couldn't catch up. Auburn fell behind, did catch up. But he doesn't want to put himself in that kind of position. Georgia favored by 7.5. And here's the deal. It's simply put. Ole Miss isn't a great running team, and they're having trouble stopping the run. Georgia's going to just try to out-physical the Rebs right at the line of scrimmage, and I think they will do it. This is an easy one for me. Georgia covers the 7.5, hands Ole Miss their first loss of the season. How about a rematch of the ACC championship game a year ago? SMU Southern Methodist at Clemson on Saturday. Now, Clemson, thanks to their early losses, they're out of the running for the ACC championship or to play in the championship game. Kevin Jennings is back at quarterback for SMU, having another great season. A guy who loves to run around, scramble around, has a good arm. Converted wide receiver a few years ago. Lashley's done a nice job. But here's the deal. Cade Klubnik, by the way, the Clemson quarterback, got banged up. Has been banged up all year, but left the game at BC last week in the fourth quarter. I was at that game, by the way. I wanted to see Clemson up close. And defensively, Clemson's pretty stout. They play really, really hard. They pressure the quarterback. And I think at home, and even though they're out of the ACC running, I think this is exactly the kind of game, the narrative that Dabo is going to be preaching to his kids. Now's the time. Let's get back on the rails. We're 3-3. Let's get to 4-3. Let's knock off SMU undefeated in the ACC. We did it last year in the ACC championship. Let's do it again. I think Clemson at home plays their best game and covers the 9.5 against SMU. How about back in the Southeastern Conference? Arkansas hosting Texas A&M. Aggies 7.5-point favorite. Mike Elko's team 6-0, soon to be 7-0. 3-0 in the Southeastern Conference, having just one heck of a season. The Hogs hung in there last week. Bobby Petrino's first game as head coach, losing 34-31 in Knoxville. But this A&M team defensively is so much better than Tennessee. They're big, they're physical, they're fast, they switch from man to zone, they confuse the quarterbacks, and I just think Arkansas will be overwhelmed even though it's at home. And ever since A&M joined the Southeastern Conference, they are 12-1 straight up against Arkansas in SEC play. I think they dominate again in this one. How about number 1, Ohio State at Wisconsin, Camp Randall Stadium. The Buckeyes 26-point favorite. You know, the Buckeyes defensively, number 1 defense in the country, allowing 6.8 points per game. Wisconsin is just, they're having problems injury-wise, coaching change, the whole 9 yards. It's a program in turmoil. Wisconsin, they lose at home last week to Iowa, 37-0. There's no reason whatsoever to think that Wisconsin is going to keep this close. Ohio State will hammer them on the road. Ohio State continues their season. They easily beat the 26-point spread. I think Wisconsin likely to get shut out for the second week in a row. How about homecoming in Gainesville? The Gators a 9.5-point favorite at home against Mississippi State. Maybe the Gators can now just let out a little sigh of relief after really a brutal schedule up to this point, and you beat Texas. You play hard but lose at Texas A&M last week, and now you come home against Mississippi State. Homecoming, always fun, even though they no longer have Gator Growl, which was the big extravaganza years ago where all the great legends, Bob Hope and Robin Williams and George Burns, just to name a few. Now it's much smaller inside the basketball arena, not nearly what it used to be, but still special, homecoming, and I really believe DJ Lagway probably has his best game against an improved Mississippi State team, but compared to the last 2 weeks, Mississippi State simply does not compare. Florida wins at home in an absolutely pivotal game for the Gators if they want to go to a bowl this season, because the schedule picks up again. You got Georgia coming up in 2 weeks. And for Billy Napier, if he should lose this game with an off week next week, likely to be relieved of his duties. So really a must-win situation for the Gators, and I think they get it done covering the spread against Mississippi State. How about Texas at Kentucky? 12.5-point favorite. Texas looked really good in hammering Oklahoma last week 23-6. Arch Manning's best game. You know, the Southeastern Conference is so competitive, and every game is so much fun. It's just the nature of the beast now in college football. But the one exception to that rule is Kentucky. and the Cats likely to go 0-8 in the Southeastern Conference. I think Mark Stoops will be relieved of his duties either by resignation or whatever. Kentucky will be one of those schools looking for a coach next year as well. Texas beats Kentucky by more than 2 touchdowns. Kentucky offensively simply cannot move the football. How about Auburn? At home against Missouri. Missouri, a 1.5-point favorite at Jordan-Hare. This was a pick'em game early in the week, and now Missouri favored by 1.5. 2 ways to look at this. Auburn's got to win a game sooner or later, right? 0-3 in the SEC. They lost a nail-biter 3 consecutive games. Oklahoma, Texas A&M. And I say nail-biter, competitive late in the fourth quarter in Georgia. They're bound to get it done, right? But at the same time, Auburn kicks off one of their great running backs this week. Obviously had some issues with the coach, wanting to redshirt, wanting to transfer, whatever the case may be. It's a program somewhat in turmoil. Some of the players are barking on social media. A lot of trouble at Auburn right now. I don't think that's the case at Missouri. I was impressed. That was a nail-biter with Alabama that goes right down to the final minutes as they lose to Alabama last week. I think Missouri comes on the road, bounces back, and hands Auburn their 4th straight loss. And again, trouble for Hugh Freeze if indeed that happens. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in this coaching carousel. Not good for a lot of coaches like Hugh Freeze, who definitely are on a fragile surface. The ice is about to crack. Meantime, USC at Notre Dame. You know, this is a game, used to be must-see TV, right? A few years ago. Remember when Pete Carroll was the coach? I just remember that game. Matt Leinart got pushed into the end zone. Charlie Weiss was the coach at Notre Dame. I mean, there's been some great games over the years, and USC much improved this season. They hammered Michigan last week. That was their best game of the year. Their only loss in the Big Ten was that last-second field goal against Illinois, which, again, was just one of those kind of games. Notre Dame, though, their Irish D, they flipped the script. First 3 games, the defense allowed 98 points. The last 3 games, they've allowed 27 points. So I think Notre Dame, after a slow start, is now getting the machine going. And while USC is improved, I think Notre Dame wins this game. But I will say this, I will take USC and the 9 points in South Bend on Saturday. I think the Irish win, but USC covers in that football game. Meantime, lastly, so excited, 3rd Saturday in October, Tennessee, 11th in the country at Alabama. The Tide now up to number 6. They've been on a roll ever since that wake-up call loss to Florida State in the opener. You know what? Tennessee's pass defense was on display last week against Arkansas. They're ranked 118th in college football, pass defense-wise. Offensively, best offense in the Southeastern Conference, Tennessee. But at the same time, I just think giving up that 31 points to Arkansas sent up a bunch of red flags for me. And this is an Alabama football team, despite a few injuries. When you go through the gauntlet like Alabama has now for the last 3 weeks, you're going to lose some guys. A couple of guys out with concussions, including Jam Miller. But I just think at home, night game, the crowd's going to be in a frenzy. That's worth at least 7 points. It is Tennessee, one of the biggest rivalries in the history of Alabama football, and for Tennessee. It'll be a very emotional game. It'll be a physical game. The crowd will be a factor. And Ty Simpson, again, keeps climbing the charts for the Heisman Trophy. Ty Simpson, another big game for Alabama as they cover that 7 against Tennessee. That's how we see it. The Pigskin Prognosticator of prodigious proportions. You might notice my t-shirt. It's an Alabama basketball camp t-shirt. My son went to the Nate Oates camp a few summers ago. Loves Coach Oates. Basketball season is upon us. Basketball Media Days was this past week in Birmingham. The Southeastern Conference will have the best men's basketball conference in the country, bar none. From top to bottom, it will be the best. We'll be talking about that with some special guests in coming weeks. And please join us, Steve Russell, an old friend, one of the great radio commentators down in Gainesville for many, many decades, RUF Radio. Check him out on the Old Gab Box podcast and radio show on YouTube. Thanks for being with us, everybody, and we'll join you next week. Enjoy the games this weekend.